And thanks for joining us here on Fox Local for our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention this afternoon. I'm Randy Meyer. Opening night featured plenty to talk about, highlighted by a speech from President Biden, who just weeks ago, many of you know, decided not to seek re-election. It also marked a return for Hillary Clinton, an energizing speech from one of the party's more progressive lawmakers and an NBA basketball coach. But it was a surprise appearance from the nominee herself that seemed to steal the show.
Looking out at everyone tonight, I see the beauty of our great nation. People from every corner of our country and every walk of life are here, united by our shared vision for the future of our country. And this November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward.
Well, the Vice President spoke briefly ahead of some of the night's biggest speakers. Harris will formally accept the nomination in a speech on Thursday night. The keynote speaker of the night was President Joe Biden. He took the stage around 10:30 last night after being introduced by his daughter. The crowd cheering and holding "We Love Joe" signs, a stark contrast from a party who seemed to turn their back on Biden before his decision to step aside. For Biden, though, it was certainly the moment he dreamed of, but it was a chance for him to highlight his presidency as well.
As your president, I've been determined to keep America moving forward, not going back, to stand against hate and violence in all its forms, to be a nation where we not only live with but thrive on diversity.
The president also used the moment to pass the torch, as you saw there, to Kamala Harris and a new direction for a Democratic Party that had so much uncertainty just a few weeks ago.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. We've not only gotten to know each other, we've become close friends. She's tough, she's experienced, and she has enormous integrity.
Last night also marked the return of Hillary Clinton, who, for the most part, has stayed out of the political spotlight following her election defeat back in 2016. Well, now 8 years later, she is once again working to beat Donald Trump, and once again, if successful, would put a woman in the White House, a feat she came so close to but failed.
Nearly 66 million Americans voted for a future where there are no ceilings on our dreams. And afterwards, we refused to give up on America. Millions marched, many ran for office. We kept our eyes on the future. Well, my friends, the future is here.
For Hillary Clinton, it was a familiar stage, facing a familiar opponent, and in her mind, a chance to change the outcome.
The president's job is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Those are the words of our founders. Take care. Just look at the candidates. Kamala cares about kids and families, cares about America. Donald only cares about himself.
Well, the night also featured some of the party's rising stars, which included a highly energized speech from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, who has a bit of love-hate relationship with her own party, but that seemed to be put aside last night as she was given a key speaking role.
And Chicago, we have to help her win. Because we know that Donald Trump would sell this country for $1 if it meant lining his own pockets and greasing the palms of his Wall Street friends. And I, for one, am tired of hearing about how a two-bit union buster thinks of himself as more of a patriot than the woman who fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots of greed, trampling on our way of life.
Live look right now at the convention floor inside the United Center. Primetime events will get going right after 5 o'clock, and if it was anything like last night, the convention could stretch late into the evening. We will review night 2 with political science professor David Schultz coming up in just a bit. But first, youth is serving the Minnesota delegation this year with the convention's 2 youngest delegates, both coming right from the land of 10,000 lakes. Our Corn Hoggart talked to them, and he joins us now live from Chicago. Corn, how did these 2 teens get involved so young?
Yeah, Randy, they're both just 17 years old, not even old enough to vote yet. They will be in the week before this election, so they will get out there and vote. But they both have fathers who are in the political game, so to speak, and their fathers will be joining them here at the convention this week. But they are here to represent a new generation of voters.
On the floor of the Democratic National Convention, Fergus Falls High School's Beatrice Shire stood proud for her lieutenant governor and for her beliefs.
I believe in equal rights. I believe in women's rights. I believe in reproductive rights.
Fergus Falls Democrats jokingly hesitated to send the 17-year-old because the last time they sent a teen to the convention, it was Jordan Rasmussen, now a Republican state senator. But youth is served in 2024, and the 2 youngest delegates to this convention are from Minnesota. Both Shirer and the slightly younger Isaac Winkler say enthusiasm jumped for them and their peers when President Joe Biden moved aside and Vice President Kamala Harris won the nomination.
And when I heard that Biden stepped down and Harris was the next nominee, I was thrilled, and I'm super excited.
I feel that she's really representing the youngest generation of voters.
Winkler takes pride in sharing his insights with the likes of Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, and the Hopkins High senior is ready to share his experience with young people back home.
I'm 17. I can't even vote in the primary yet, but you can do something. No matter, where you are or how old you are, you can make a difference.
And just as an aside, both of them told me they had to go and buy new wardrobes to come here and be delegates at the convention. In fact, Winkler has just one suit, and he's still deciding which night to wear, but thinks it might be Wednesday when Governor Walz accepts the vice presidential nomination.
That's good.
Randy?
That's a pretty good choice. Hey, Corn, we're hearing that some people are having trouble getting into the United Center, specifically those traveling by shuttle bus. What do you know about that?
Yeah, we heard from a lot of the delegates from Minnesota this morning who told us it took them up to 4 hours to get here last night taking the shuttle buses. That's probably, well, for us it was a half an hour trip. It took them 4 hours to get here. Some of them missed a lot of the speeches they wanted to see, but they got here in time to see President Biden. They were happy for that. However, there is quite a bit of a backup when you're taking the shuttle buses here. They all come to the same entrance. There was a security issue yesterday with some of the protesters that forced the perimeter back a couple of blocks in several of the places that we saw, which also slowed the shuttles down. And so they're working on that. But one of the things they told everybody was try to get on the early shuttles. The guys who took off at 3:30 yesterday got here a lot quicker than the ones who took off at maybe 6 o'clock last night. Those guys just barely made it to see President Biden last night.
All right, plan ahead. Corn, thank you. Thanks for keeping us updated down there. We'll check in with you later tonight. Let's look ahead now to tonight. The Obamas are the headliners. Former President Barack Obama will deliver the keynote address, and former First Lady Michelle Obama will also be expected to speak tonight. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker will also speak. Earlier in the night, there will be a ceremonial roll call vote to nominate Kamala Harris. Now, this was already done virtually, so it's really all about the show tonight. President Biden's home state of Delaware will go first. Minnesota and Harris's home state of California will go last. Much more to come, and we'll bring you some political science professor theories from David Schultz on what's happening at the convention. We'll discuss last night's big moments and preview what's ahead in the coming days. Stay right here. Hamline University Political Science professor David Schultz for some insight tonight. David, let's start with last night. Conventions usually give parties a bit of a momentum while the other sits kind of on the sidelines for a week or so. You could make a case that Democrats actually had the momentum or had some momentum heading into this convention because of the happenings in the last couple of weeks with the naming of the VP and, of course, Biden stepping away from the campaign. How do they build on this? Is it already there? What's your take?
Well, you're right. There's been a pretty good momentum going for several weeks. One of the things that we generally know is after a convention, the bump is temporary, but it's usually about, let's say, between 3 and 5 points. And the reason why I mention this is that we should have seen, coming out of the Republican convention, Trump enjoying a bump of 3 to 5 points. But largely, he didn't get a bump because of all the events, like in terms of what happened. You know, Biden leaving, Harris coming in, Walz being picked. And so Trump doesn't get the bump. Harris has been really on a roll for the last couple of weeks. Anticipate that she will come out of this convention with an additional bump. I would say if we were looking at polls, let's say approximately Monday or Tuesday next week, she's going to probably be coming out of this convention with about let's say, a 4 or 5 point national lead, and in the critical swing states somewhere about the same. So she's in a really good position right now, at least temporarily. And the question for her now becomes, how does she keep building upon it and sustaining it? And reverse, of course, how does Trump now regain the momentum? Because it really has shifted, again, according to the polls in the last few weeks.
Well, let's stick with that theory for just a second. Then that leaves both candidates roughly 70 some days before the election. In your view, or in sort of the historic perspective of this, is that a lot of time or not enough time for one to move the needle?
It's still quite a bit of time at this point. If we can take us back in time, for example, probably the biggest shift in our lifetime, at least my lifetime, is 1988. On Labor Day weekend, Michael Dukakis had nearly a 15 to 16 point lead. It might have even been larger against George H.W. Bush. And at the end of the day, lost the election. So that was with roughly, 60 days, 65 days out. So incredible swings are possible here at a point where we have far more polarization, less undecided voters. I doubt we're going to see that much. But still, I would not be surprised that we could still see a 5 to 6 to 7 point shift between now and election day. And again, with roughly 60, 65 days to go, except in some states like Minnesota, early voting start on September 20th, still plenty of time for momentum to shift for candidates, because after Labor Day is when people start to pay more attention, and those undecided voters, the ones who are going to probably decide the election, that's when they're going to start focusing in.
That's where I wanted to go with this next question is how much of the electorate really look at these elections with any interest or decision-making prior to Labor Day?
Yeah, I mean, clearly those people who are most interested in politics, the partisans on both sides, care a lot about this. You know, the people who are probably watching the convention, again, are those people who are just very interested in politics. But for those, and my estimate is for the 150,000 to 200,000 swing voters in the critical swing states, it's not clear they're really watching. But I want to mention that's just in those critical swing states. There's probably a few million people who are still undecided, but in some states, which are leaning very strongly Republican or Democrat, what they do effectively doesn't matter. But for that very small percentage, after Labor Day, we really know that. Because think about it. People are worried about what? End of summer vacation, going back to school, things like that.
David, you being a historian, you'll understand this, and I kind of want to highlight it for the people that are watching us right now. There was a pretty high degree of theatrics last night with the passing of the torch. It's something we have never seen, certainly not in my lifetime, where a sitting president who's been forced out of a campaign is now passing the torch to his vice president, who's now campaigning for a job he was campaigning 4 weeks ago. It's an odd dichotomy that we saw last night. What was your take on how that went down?
You know, it was kind of interesting in a lot of ways, because you're right. We've never had this in American history before, where we've had this kind of situation. So we're dealing with unique historical circumstances. Part of what I wondered last night, and I'd be curious what your thought is on this too, is that the president of the United States basically gets pushed out of prime time.
Yeah.
And on one level, you think he's the president. He gets prime time. He gets to make the call of when he gets to speak and so forth. But the fact that he was there, but after prime time, really suggests to me that the focus was less upon sort of acknowledging him, less upon what he was doing, and instead pushing in a different direction to try to, again, capture those that new generation of voters. How well they did that, again, we have to wait and see what the polls are going to say. But the fact that he was relegated beyond prime time really surprised me in terms of how the Democrats played it with him.
It was also surprising to me, since you asked, that they would put him that late in the evening, not only just because of prime time, but because he's been very open about the fact that he functions much better during the day than at night. That is about as late in the convention as you can speak. And you have to wonder how not only his handlers, but the party itself sat down and said, who is this best for, Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, to put him where they put him? And there's a theory running around out there. They purposely put him late because they wanted to reaffirm with voters and with delegates there that, yes, Kamala is the right choice because this is how he functions this late in the evening. That was an interesting take, but I thought maybe not that far off.
Maybe not that far off, but also given the fact that what the Democrats need to do is not to motivate the people who are already going to vote for Joe Biden. I mean, they had those people. What they needed to motivate were college-educated suburban women, I'll just say women in general, people under the age of 30, and people of color. And if you look at who got highlighted last night, at least 2, if not 3 of those constituencies received prime time in terms of coverage. And so I think what they were also making is a calculated decision is to say, who do we most want to reach? Who do we still need to get excited? And it probably is not the hardcore Biden people, because again, they were going to show up. Mm-hmm. That's why you saw people like AOC, you saw people like Secretary Clinton, who were speaking last night. We saw we saw union people, all trying to sort of aim at people whose motivation might not have been there before, but now is catching fire, and the Democrats really wanted to highlight that.
Let's talk about that. You mentioned Hillary Clinton and AOC. In your view, which one benefited Kamala Harris the most? And we can just say openly that Hillary Clinton hasn't really been seen much in politics in 8 years. She has been fairly bitter about her loss to Donald Trump. The party itself marginalized her because they wanted to move on past her. AOC has been at odds with the party in general since she took office as part of the squad, yet both of them were there touting Kamala Harris. Did either one of them move the needle, or was it odd to have both of them there at all?
Of the two, I think AOC clearly did. But I think you're right. The juxtaposition of what we saw last night was to say that Hillary Clinton represents one part of the Democratic Party, AOC another part, and the fact that they both spoke at the same time. One of the big themes, one of the big emphasis, I think, of last night, and really for all this week, is to say for the Democrats, we are a united party. We can transcend the baby boomers and an earlier generation of people who care about politics, who are involved in politics, and we can reach out to the millennials and Gen Zs. So I think both of them were part of that critical package. But if I think in terms of the two who really electrified the delegation more, it was clearly AOC, whose speech, I mean, if you just look at the reaction from the crowd, it was significant. It really was.
All right, tonight the Obamas will speak. Do the Obamas still hold that sort of coveted position in the party that whatever the Obamas say goes?
It's fading a little bit, but again, if I go back to what I just said here about connecting past, present, and future, in terms of like the different constituencies of the party, there's no question that Obama still represents an important part of the party. And if we go back to saying that there are 3 groups that the Democrats have to motivate, under the age of 30, women and people of color, Obama resonates with those people of color, and that's going to be very, very important tonight, because there's been concern that African Americans, but just in general, people of color have not responded well to Biden's campaign, and Harris has not completely sealed the deal yet. So having the Obama speak tonight really captures a lot of the base that's out there that needs to be motivated to show up to vote for Harris and Walz.
Mm-hmm. One final question for you, David, because it may indicate exactly how important the state of Wisconsin is. Harris and Walz will not even be at the convention tonight, we're told. Opting instead, they're going to host a campaign rally in Milwaukee. We generally don't see a party offer what would be considered counter-programming to their own convention. What does that indicate to you?
Well, first, obviously, it indicates how important Wisconsin is. And two, I think what's broken down now on both sides is that generally during a convention, the party not having the convention goes on vacation. They just go do something else out of out of like mutual respect. They don't campaign against one another during that week. What we're now seeing is that Trump and Vance are out campaigning actively in the swing states. I think at this point, what we're seeing is that both Harris and Walz feel like they have to counteract that and at the same time take advantage of the convention to go out and raise money in this case of Wisconsin. So this is an election, which we've talked about so many times, where the rules have changed. This is yet another, let's say, informal rule that's changed or broken down.
All right, David, always appreciate your insight. Very interesting. There's a lot to mull over, not only today, tonight, tomorrow, but for the next 65 days, as you point out. So I'm glad to have you here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back. Finally, tonight, sports and politics can be a very fine line, but there are some who don't want athletes to speak out on political issues at all, and others who believe athletes should use their platform to speak out. Well, former NBA player, Team USA coach, and current Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr chose the latter. He made his pitch for Harris and Walz and also had some fun with Walz's coaching background. Take a look.
Whether Vice President Harris was defending her community in the courtroom or Governor Walz was inspiring the next generation in the classroom or on the field, for that matter. By the way, coach to coach, that guy's awesome. Although, I have to say, Coach Walz, way too much reliance on the blitz in '99 against Mankato East. You had a strong defensive line. I would have played more press coverage with your corners and then dropped the safeties into a Tampa 2. That's just me.
Not a bad idea. Kerr having a little fun there. Pretty good for someone who just won a gold medal as well. We are all here. We're here all week here on Fox Local. Tonight we'll have live coverage from the DNC beginning at 8 o'clock again, and we'll be back here tomorrow for our You Decide special on the Democratic National Convention. As you can see, our Corn Hoggart is live in Chicago all week long as well. That is going to do it for now. Join us back here on Fox Local at 8 o'clock for primetime coverage of the DNC. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tonight and back here tomorrow at 3 o'clock.